What's going on? Matt Savoca here from Awesemo.com, bringing you the Week 16 Thursday Night Football DraftKings Contenders video. This is San Francisco versus Tennessee, two playoff teams in what should be an excellent matchup. 44.5-point total. I've already seen it move down to 44 in some places, with the San Francisco 49ers currently favored on the road, 3.5-point spread in this one currently. Well, guys, before we get into this one, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel so that you always know when we're going live. You guys know what to do. And if you could give me, Matt Savoca, a follow on Twitter at Draftaholic, that's always much appreciated as well. We'd also like to thank our presenting sponsor, No House Advantage. No House Advantage is offering player props contests for all major sports, and if you use promo code Awesemo, you can get a first match deposit bonus up to $25. Go ahead and download it on the App Store or Google Play, or go to nohouseadvantage.com and get started today. And don't forget that promo code Awesemo. Okay, guys, on the screen here, you will see my 10 through 6 of my top plays. There are some players we're hedging our bets a little bit because we don't know their availability for this game as of Thursday morning, as of right now. So number 10, the 49ers defense. They're favored by 3.5 points. The total isn't that high. Of course you can play a defense. They're showing up in 18% of our simulations in the optimal lineup. A little bit high, but not surprisingly high. Same situation here with kicker Robbie Gould. You can play kickers on teams that don't always push the tempo or pass all the time, but are expected to win here. And again, the 49ers are 3.5-point favorites. So he's coming in the optimal lineup 25% of the time. Number 8, Brandon Ayuk. Could still be getting more work here in the 49ers offense. Clearly third in the receiving core behind Deebo Samuel and George Kittle, but still a quarter of the time he's in the optimal lineup, a solid chance of scoring a touchdown against the Tennessee defense. And then two players at 7 and 6 who we're really not sure as of now whether they are going to be able to play. Eli Mitchell still in the concussion protocol, has not been activated at this point. He still has a 33% chance of being in the optimal lineup. Of course, those chances are only if he is in. There's still a pretty solid chance he's out this week. Same thing with A.J. Brown, designated to return from injured reserve, but that doesn't mean he has to return this week. If he's in, obviously, he'll probably be in the optimal lineup more than the 36% of the times that we have him in our current simulations. But right now, we're still unsure if he is going to play tonight. That's why he comes in at number 6. None of them make the top 5 on my list this week. Who does? Let's watch and find out. Number 5, it's D'Onta Foreman, and D'Onta Foreman saw his snap share increase from 33% to around 39% last week, but much more importantly, he saw 52% of the rushing attempts for the Tennessee Titans and 59% of all the running back rush attempts last week. Ends up over 100 rushing yards, his most impressive game as a Tennessee Titan, and he still got vultured at the goal line by Ryan Tannehill. That could happen here, obviously, but he's getting over 30 fantasy points in 6.8% of our simulations, which is pretty solid for a part-time running back on a team that is technically an underdog. What we're really liking here is his median projection, 14.7 DraftKings fantasy points at just a 7.6K salary on DraftKings. That is really valuable. Just a solid value play all around. That's why you're seeing nearly a third of the time he's an optimal flex play here, and 43% of the time he is an optimal play in the optimal lineup this week. Foreman has a really, really strong chance of having a good game here, even though the San Francisco 49ers, it has a very stout defensive line. Foreman should get enough opportunity to be valuable in this one-game slate. Number 4, it's Jimmy Garoppolo, and Garoppolo does have some solid upside here. I mean, he's had 290 yards plus passing in 2 of his last 3 starts here, but that median projection, 14.7 DraftKings fantasy points, is the exact same as D'Onta Foreman, and Garoppolo has a higher salary at $10,400. But we know for quarterbacks on a single game slate, they have a level of safety that no other skill position has here. In 30% of the simulations, he's under 10 fantasy points, but much more important, he's over 30 fantasy points in 12.9% of our simulations. He is an optimal captain play 12% of the time. I think I like him a little bit more as a simple flex option. Not surprising to see a quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo, who's leading an offense full of superstar receivers right now in the optimal lineup 47% of the time. Number 3, it's George Kittle, and really Deebo Samuel returning to the lineup has not been much of a negative at all for George Kittle. He, quote, came back down to earth with 93 receiving yards, but how does 425 receiving yards over your last 3 games from a tight end sound to you? Because that's what George Kittle has got going on right now, a 36% target share since week 12. Yeah, sure. He's a receiver. He's tight end technically, but he's part of the receiving corps. There's some volatility in the projection. He's under 10 fantasy points in 26.6% of our simulations, but over 30 fantasy points 17% of the time, 16 fantasy points as a median projection, and the optimal captain play nearly 13% of the time. George Kittle, an absolute yak monster, really unrivaled at the tight end position. He's in the optimal lineup 51% of the time. Number 2, it's Deebo Samuel, one of the most uniquely utilized skill position players in the NFL. The San Francisco 49ers clearly do not care how they're getting Deebo Samuel the ball. They're just ensuring that they do so. They'll get him to him behind the line of scrimmage as a rusher, near the line of scrimmage as a dump-off passer, or they'll throw to him deep as well. He's outside the top 20 wide receivers in receptions, but inside the top 10 wide receivers in receiving yards. And over his last 3 games played, he has over 10 rushes more than any other wide receiver in the NFL, and he's averaging a ridiculous 6.6 yards per carry on those rushes. Just an amazing breakout year for Deebo Samuel, and that's why we're seeing over 30 fantasy points in 18.2% of our simulations. San Francisco, thanks to players like Samuel and George Kittle, are now ranked 3rd best in the NFL in PFF's offensive grades, and they're playing against a defense in Tennessee who is 11th best in team defensive grades, but they have struggled against wide receivers and tight ends more so than against opposing rushing attacks, which leads us to the best players on the 49ers, Kittle, and of course, Deebo Samuel. He's the optimal captain play 15.6% of the time and has a whopping 56% chance of being in the optimal lineup with a 17.1 median fantasy projection. Now, before I get into my final play, my number 1 play on DraftKings for Thursday Night Football this week, I do want to remind you guys, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel so that you always know when we're going live. You guys know what to do. And if you could give me, Matt Savoca, a follow on Twitter, that would be much appreciated. We'd also like to thank our presenting sponsor, No House Advantage, one more time here. Go ahead and download it on the App Store or Google Play, or just go to nohouseadvantage.com and make sure to use that promo code Awesemo to get a first match deposit bonus up to $25. Okay, guys, let's get into my number 1 play on DraftKings for this Thursday Night Football game. At number 1, it's Ryan Tannehill, quarterback for the Tennessee Titans. Not the most electrifying player on this slate, but probably the best value when you just compare median projection. Right now we have him at 17.6 median projected fantasy points here at a 10,000 salary. That is where it looks pretty good when you compare projection to salary-based expectation. Tannehill is a go. He's leading the number 15 offense right now in PFF's offensive grades, and that's where he is in advanced metrics like EPA or completion percentage over expected. But Tannehill, since 2019, since he took over as the starter for the Tennessee Titans, he has been up there with one of the most efficient quarterbacks in advanced metrics, with players like Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers during that same extended span. So if he's getting players like AJ Brown back possibly, and Julio Jones possibly back in the lineup, then we can say the upside is really there for a player like Tannehill. And I'm not surprised to see him at a really solid 15.5% chance of getting over 30 DraftKings fantasy points. He's the optimal captain play over 16% of the time. And just ahead of Deebo Samuel, he is our number 1 play, being the optimal lineup 57% of the time. And that's going to do it for this edition, the Week 16 Thursday Night Football edition of the DraftKings Contender. This should be a really, really good game, a playoff style game. A little concerned here that both teams will turn to a conservative, rush focused approach, which might limit the number of plays in this game, but there are enough talented skill position players, especially if Julio Jones and or AJ Brown play for the Titans, that we can say that the shootout potential remains high here. Ultimately, I think San Francisco pulls this out by a field goal. If you are looking for the FanDuel version of this video, it's around here somewhere on the channel. Go check it out. We will be back on Saturday for the special Saturday slate edition of the Contenders video. Until then, I'm Matt Savoca from Awesemo.com. We will see you guys next time.